Hello everyone, Dark of All Trades here. Are you an atheist? If so, can you explain right from wrong? According to today's video, no you can't. Today's video is from a channel about the same size as mine called David Cipriano. I'm guessing that's his name, so I'll call him David. David here put out a short called Why Atheists Can't Explain Morality. Well, I'm pretty sure I can and have explained morality, and different kinds of morality, over several videos. But I want to keep this part short. This isn't about me and my ego.
If there's anything more important than my ego on this ship, I want to cut and shut right now.
Maybe David has a really good explanation. Put your guesses in what it's going to be in the comments. Now let's see why atheists can't explain morality.
Only heaven silent for an answer.
You know, if atheism were true and we didn't have a divine creator, then how would we know right from wrong?
The question, how would we know right from wrong without a divine creator, reveals a fantastic assumption in moral philosophy. Imagine if I told you that without believing in Zeus, you couldn't possibly know how lightning works. Sounds absurd, right? Yet this is essentially the same logic being applied to morality. Let me share my perspective as a moral subjectivist and situational ethicist. Think of moral subjectivism like music preferences. While there's no objectively best song, our preferences are deeply meaningful and often shaped by culture, experience, and reasoning. They're subjective, yet they profoundly influence our lives and choices. With this, I can set my personal favorite style of music and then give objective reasons why I like that song based on that subjective experience. For example, I enjoy EBM, electronic body music, because of its heavy beats, its beautiful melodies, its darker tones, and emotional lyrics. These elements resonate deeply with me. For someone else, they might not, and that's okay. These differences in preference don't change the factual characteristics of the music itself. Morality is similar in that we define our moral goals, analogous to choosing a favorite music style, and then evaluate actions objectively in relation to those goals, much like we describe objective qualities of music style and explain why we like it. If someone doesn't like EBM, they have a few options. They can talk to me to understand why I enjoy it and perhaps gain an appreciation for it. They can share their perspective and try to convince me to play something else. Or they can simply keep their opinions to themselves, or they can just leave the goth club where it's playing. Similarly, if someone disagrees with the moral goals of a society, they can discuss it with others to understand why those goals are valued. They can express their own views to advocate for change, or they can find a different society that better aligns with their own values. Situational ethics takes this understanding and applies it practically. Rather than following rigid rules, we analyze each scenario's unique context. So imagine you're driving someone to the hospital during a medical emergency. They're experiencing a life-threatening situation, and every second counts. Normally, speeding and running red lights are considered wrong because they endanger others on the road. However, in this case, breaking traffic laws might be the moral imperative because of the urgency of saving a life outweighs the general rule of obeying the law. This example shows how ethical decisions often require careful consideration of circumstances rather than absolute rules. Evolutionary biology and anthropology provide compelling evidence that moral behavior predates organized religion. We see reciprocity, fairness, and empathy in social animals, from elephants to bonobos. Human morality has likely evolved as a survival advantage, helping our ancestors form cooperative societies. The truly interesting question isn't how can we know right from wrong without God, but rather how do humans across cultures and throughout history develop sophisticated moral frameworks? The answer lies in our capacity for reason, empathy, and social learning, natural processes that have shaped our species' evolution.
You see, atheists can have morals and they can live by morals, but they can't really explain why they have morals.
There's something quite remarkable about this statement. It actually represents progress in the religious secular dialogue. Unlike many traditional arguments that claim some flavor of the idea that atheists can't be moral at all, this one acknowledges that we can both have and live by moral principles. That is a significant step forward. However, the claim that we can't really explain why we have morals, well, that's where things get a little interesting. Let's conduct a thought experiment. Imagine you're walking in the park and you see a child fall into a lake. Without hesitation, you'd likely feel compelled to help, even at some risk to yourself. Ask yourself, did you need to consult any religious text to feel that saving a life is the right thing to do? Or did this reaction arise naturally from empathy, social cooperation, and an innate sense of justice that humans have developed through evolution and living in communities? Modern research in evolutionary psychology, neuroscience, and anthropology provides fascinating insights on the origins of human morality. We've discovered that basic moral behaviors like fairness, reciprocity, and harm avoidance appear in human societies across the globe, regardless of their religious beliefs. Even more compelling, we see precursors of moral behavior in other social animals, suggesting that these traits evolved long before organized religion. The irony here is beautiful. By acknowledging that atheists can have and follow morals while claiming we can't explain them, the argument essentially proves our point. If atheists can be moral without believing in a divine source, doesn't this demonstrate that morality can exist independent of religious belief? It's like saying someone can't explain how their car works while they're successfully driving it. Understanding the source or mechanics of something may not be necessary for its practical application.
And they might try to explain it, but every argument that they have is going to fall short.
Every argument is going to fall short? That's a remarkably bold claim, and it reveals something fascinating about how we approach knowledge and understanding. Think about this. In 1746, Benjamin Franklin flew a kite in a thunderstorm to study electricity. Before that, most people believed lightning was purely supernatural. Imagine telling someone that one day we'd harness electricity to power devices that fit in our pockets that connect us instantly across the globe. They might have said that explanation falls short. This pattern of, if we can't fully explain it now, we never will, appears throughout history, and is what philosophers call an argument from incredulity. It's like saying, I can't imagine how this could work, therefore it can't work. But here's the thing, reality doesn't care about our inability to explain it. Gravity kept objects falling long before Newton described why. Your digestive system works perfectly well, even if you can't explain the Krebs cycle. What's particularly interesting about moral behaviors is that we can observe its development across species and cultures. Primatologists like Franz de Waal have documented moral behaviors in chimpanzees, sharing food, consoling distressed companions, and enforcing fair play. These observations suggest that basic moral foundations evolved long before we could philosophically explain them. The history of human knowledge is essentially a journey from, we can't explain this, to, oh, that's how it works. From germ theory to plate tectonics, from quantum mechanics to evolutionary psychology, our understanding grows continuously. The fact that we might not have complete explanations for moral behavior today doesn't mean our current explanations fall short. It just means we're somewhere along that journey of understanding.
But for theists, and for Christians especially, we do have good justifications for our morals.
Let's explore the word good in this claim. Imagine we're judging a pie contest. One judge says, this is a good pie because it tastes just like my grandmother's recipe. Another said, this is a good pie because it follows classical French techniques. Who's right? Well, they're both using different standards to define good, and that's exactly what's happening in moral discussions. When someone says they have good justifications for their morals, we need to ask, good according to what standard? This isn't just philosophical wordplay. It gets to the heart of how we reason about morality. A Hindu might claim that their morals come from Dharma, a Muslim from Allah, a Norse pagan from Odin. Each would say their justification is good, and each would point to different, often conflicting moral rules. If a Christian bases their morality on God, then by definition, doing anything that God is, says, or does is deemed morally good. It is a closed system where the standard is self-referential. Similarly, if someone based their morality on Jimmy Buffett, then everything he said or did would also have to be considered good, whether it's about life in Margaritaville or beyond. The standard is perfect only because it's being compared to itself. So would that mean that one could say, we have good justifications for our morals based on Jimmy Buffett? When I ground my morality in the well-being of sentient creatures, I'm laying my cards on the table. This is my starting point, my foundational assumption. Religious frameworks do the same thing by starting with, God exists and defines morality. The key difference? We can observe, measure, and discuss well-being in the real world. We can see how actions affect suffering and happiness. We can study the consequences of different moral choices on actual living beings. Think of it like building a house. Religious morality says, we have the perfect blueprint from God. Secular morality says, let's design based on what we know about human needs, safety, and comfort. Both are starting points, but one can be tested and refined through experience and evidence.
And the reason why we have objective morality is because God, the creator of all of mankind, wrote his law on our hearts.
God wrote his laws on our hearts is a poetic phrase, but let's think about what it actually means. Imagine if I told you that Jimmy Buffett wrote all the rules of mixology on everyone's hearts. You'd probably ask for some evidence beyond just my assertion, right? And you'd be puzzled when different parrot heads interpreted these cocktail commandments in completely different ways. This is exactly what we see with religious moral claims. If there's truly an objective moral law written on everyone's hearts, why do we see such dramatic differences in moral interpretation? Let's look at some real examples. The Presbyterian Church USA, or PCUSA, celebrates same-sex marriages as expressions of love and commitment. Meanwhile, the Presbyterian Church in America, the PCA, considers them morally wrong. Both groups read the same Bible, pray to the same God, and claim to follow the same divine law. Yet they reach opposite conclusions, and they're both called Presbyterian. Catholic tradition teaches that artificial conception violates God's law, while most Protestant denominations see it as morally neutral or even positive for family planning. Southern Baptists prohibit, or at least strongly discourage, drinking alcohol, while Lutherans and Catholics include wine in most of their sacred ceremonies. These aren't minor disagreements, they're fundamental differences in how people interpret this supposedly objective moral law. It's like having a universal cookbook that somehow leads half the chefs to believe sugar is essential for cookies, while the other half insists it's forbidden. We also see moral views evolving over time within the same religious traditions. Many Christian denominations once used biblical arguments to defend slavery and segregation. Today, most consider racism a sin, despite using the same holy text. Did God's law change, or did human interpretation evolve with society? This diversity of interpretation creates a logical problem. If God wrote a clear, objective moral law on everyone's hearts, why can't people, even those of the same religion, agree on what it says? The simpler explanation is that human moral reasoning develops through culture, reason, and experience, which is exactly what we'd expect from natural rather than supernatural origins.
And that's the reason that we have objective morality. So the existence of evil doesn't disprove God, it actually is evidence that there is a God.
Let's talk about this, surprising conclusion. And I mean surprising in both content and context. Imagine you're having a conversation about coffee brewing methods, and someone suddenly declares, "So, bad weather doesn't disprove that aliens invented coffee. Actually, it proves they did." You'd probably be a bit confused, right? That's exactly what's happening here. Here, David makes two remarkable leaps. First, he introduces the problem of evil, a complex philosophical argument about reconciling the existence of suffering with an all-powerful, all-good deity, completely out of nowhere. It's like a quarterback throwing a Hail Mary pass when no one's even playing football. But the second claim is even more, just more. That evil somehow proves God exists. Think about the logic here. It's like saying, the existence of typing errors proves that there must be a perfect typist somewhere. Or the fact that some restaurants serve bad food proves that Gordon Ramsay exists. These conclusions simply don't follow from the premises. What's particularly fun is that this argument could be used to prove literally any deity. If evil proves the Christian God exists, why wouldn't it equally prove that Loki exists, or Angra Mainyu, the Zoroastrian spirit of destruction, or any other divine being associated with morality? David seems to be suggesting that, without God, we couldn't recognize evil. But I've already discussed how moral understanding can develop naturally through evolution, reasoning, and social development. Just like we can recognize bad cooking without believing in a divine chef, we can recognize harmful actions without requiring supernatural moral arbiters. And that's the end of his video. So let me try to express his entire argument as to why atheists can't explain morality. Premise 1. If atheism is true, then there is no divine creator. Premise 2. If there is no divine creator, then there can be no objective morality. Premise 3. Atheists can live by morals, but they cannot explain them. Premise 4. Theists have valid explanations for their morals. Premise 5. Objective morality exists because God wrote his law on the hearts of humanity. Premise 6. The existence of evil is evidence of God's existence. Conclusion. Therefore, God's existence is necessary for objective morality, and the existence of evil is evidence that God exists. So what are the problems here? Well, I touched on some of them, but I wanted to save more of the logical fallacies for the end here. So it starts with a false dichotomy. The argument implies that either one must accept a theistic moral framework or fail to explain morality, ignoring secular frameworks that successfully explain morality without reference to a divine being. He then makes a bare assertion. The statement that atheists can't explain morality is simply asserted without providing any evidence or engagement with the robust ethical systems that atheists have developed, such as Unitarianism or humanism, etc. He then commits the begging the question fallacy. The claim that God wrote his law on people's hearts assumes that the listener already accepts the premise of God's existence without providing independent evidence for it. He then ends with a stunning non sequitur. The conclusion about evil being evidence of God's existence doesn't logically follow from the premise that evil exists. Nowhere in his video does he ever talk about the problem of evil or even bring it up until the very conclusion. And even if he did, evil doesn't necessarily point to the existence of a God and could very easily be interpreted as contradictory to the existence of an all-good, all-powerful deity. Overall, I give this video a solid 8 facepalmy Mr. Jesuses out of 10. He uses clear, simple language and follows a straightforward structure, which makes this argument accessible to general audiences, which saves it from a worse score. However, there are significant issues, especially his misrepresenting of atheists' ability to explain moral foundations, to the point where his position is demonstrably false. Additionally, he fails to engage with secular moral philosophy or evolutionary explanations for moral behavior, as well as committing a plethora of logical fallacies. That's it for this one, so what do you think? Do you think David here has really explained why atheists can't explain morality? Or is it possible that he simply hasn't spoken to any atheists about the matter and is assuming he knows what we think? Perhaps he's so deeply convinced that his morality based on his version of a deity is the only valid moral system and therefore cannot fathom any other justification. After all, for him, his morality and his deity are inherently true, and that belief leads him to assume that no one could possibly have a moral framework outside of that. Do you agree that thinking that his perspective is the only one that matters is a bit absurd? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Speaking of perspective, if, from your perspective, this was an excellent response, hit that like button to share that perspective. If you're looking to unlock even more perspective prospects, hit that subscribe button to continue gaining fresh perspectives. And consider sharing this or another one of my videos to your medias of social or groups of debate to provide provisional perspective and potentially provide perspective prospects. Speaking of prospectors, I need to give the specialist of thanks to my patrons, especially Calamitous Anima and Sora, as well as the rest of you for giving me that little extra encouragement to be academic, but still a bit silly. If you would like to be a Spectre, pro or otherwise, you can join them for as low as a single $1 a month at patreon.com/darkofalltrades. I super appreciate all of you for just enjoying my content. I'm trying to get more eyes on my videos and grow my channel a little more. I've been in talks with some other content creators, and I look forward to some coming projects, and I hope you enjoy them too. And as always, keep learning.
So that's why my religion